1988 was an odd year for the Hudson Zenkoku Caravan. Not only did the competition feature a new system, the PC Engine, the game was also a totally different genre. Power League Baseball brought the Caravan from shmups to sports. Thankfully, in 1989, Hudson would bring the Caravan back to form with a new Star Soldier-style game, this time developed by Compile. Gunhed is a vertical-scrolling shooting game developed by Compile for the PC Engine in 1989. Based loosely on a movie of the same name, Gunhed was featured in the Zenkoku Caravan competition the same year of its release. It was also released in North America as Blazing Lasers for the TurboGrafx-16 later the same year. Being a Compile game, there's a lot to the game that does depart from the Star Soldier norms. Gunhed instead plays much more like an LS title. In reality, the only reason that Gunhed is even lumped in with the Star Soldier series is due to Hudson Soft's publishing and its association with the Caravan. However, it's no less important to Hudson's PC Engine history, so let's take a closer look. So far on Bullet Heaven, we've taken a look at only one other game from Compile, Space Megaforce for the Super NES, otherwise known as Super Aleste. But others outside of the Aleste series such as Zanak and Gunnak follow a very similar template, and Gunhed is no exception. Typical 8-way directionals get Gunhed around the screen at a fair rate, though multiple speeds allow players to increase or decrease their speed by way of the select button on the PC Engine's gamepad. Players can fire their main weapons with the 2 button. 4 weapons exist which are dropped from item-carrying ships and indicated by a Roman numeral. 1 activates the default weapon, the Photon Blaster. It behaves very similarly to the main shots in Star Soldier, topping out at full power with a 5-directional pattern. 2 activates a wide shot known as the Disruptor Wave, which can pass through enemies to damage other enemies behind them. Weapon 3 is Field Thunder, a spreading electrical attack that shifts and morphs as it gets more powerful. This weapon is arguably the best, and definitely the most fun to watch. Finally, Weapon 4 activates the Ring Blaster, which deploys up to 4 orbiting bits that damage enemy targets, while the player has access to a lightly powered Photon Blaster. All of these weapons can be powered up through several levels by collecting multiple weapon drops of the same number, or by way of purple jewels. Each subsequent level will require more and more jewels to increase the player's level again to a maximum level of 5. Players can survive a hit from enemies at the cost of weapon power if enough is available, but if a player is destroyed, they'll be dropped to default basic power. In the same manner as primary weapons are dropped, there are also a number of secondary weapons and defensive measures available to players as well, indicated with various letters. An H activates homing missiles, M will create a multi-body which creates a trace-following option to supplement the player's fire. S will grant the player a shield which can withstand enemy attacks, and F enables full fire, which enhances the player's firepower with alternate shot types. However, certain fire types are less powerful or less versatile than a powered-up regular shot of the same kind. Collecting multiple pickups of the same secondary type will enhance the potency of this ability. Bombs are deployed by way of the 1 button on the PC Engine gamepad. A bomber clears a local area of the screen of enemies and their bullets while inflicting heavy damage to larger foes that remain, including bosses. Players start with a default stock of 3 bombs, but more are awarded for each secondary weapon collected and tops out with a stock of 16. Since so many can be amassed fairly easily, they can be liberally used if a quick screen clear is required or if an especially troublesome boss needs a swift kick in their junk. But there's an additional secret bomber too. Green carriers drop weapons and abilities that cycle through all of the different types. If players shoot these, they will pause on the current weapon. But if shot enough, they will transform into a flashing jewel that clears the entire screen when collected. Obviously, knowing what weapons and abilities work best for the player will take a bit of getting used to and a lot of experimentation. Another common LS function also appears in Gunhed in the form of special lives. When a player is destroyed, they will typically be sent back to a checkpoint, which can be kinda brutal. Through various conditions though, a special life can be awarded, indicated by a gold life icon rather than a silver one in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. When a special life is in play, a player will immediately respawn where they died. This can be a little problematic though, as the player's invincibility phase is very brief and enemy shots are still in play. This could easily lead to another immediate death if the player is not careful. Gunhed is played over the course of 9 stages, and if we're totally honest, they can go on way too long. Oftentimes these stages are twice the length of a typical 16-bit shooter, typically broken up with some kind of mid-boss. Especially with the checkpoint system throwing the player so far back, the game can sometimes feel as if it overstays its welcome. But on the whole, it's fun enough, but it's also kind of easy and can get a little on the boring side. Thankfully, there are hidden extra difficulties. This tops out at Supermania in the US Blazing Lasers, and goes to the extreme with the extra intense God of Game mode, which is only present in the Japanese Gunhed. So if you like your caravan shooters challenging, this is a very welcome addition. The scoring in Gunhed is very basic. Simply shoot and destroy as much as possible in every stage and a player's score will climb in no time. A couple of other tactics also exist to boost the score even higher, which are a little on the unconventional side. Even halfway decent players will be able to gain many extends through their playthrough of the game. Bosses yield a huge amount of points, which often awards multiple extends to players for the next stage. This opens the possibility for strategic dying in stages that have a very large amount of destructible elements to boost the score way up. Of course, knowing how to navigate some of these stages with only basic firepower can also be tricky, so there's a gigantic amount of risk-reward in doing this. However, competitively speaking, there's no better way to get a stupid high score than milking an entire stage filled with explodey bits. At Game Over, the player's score and high score is displayed in bold numerals, allowing players to easily take a picture of their exploits. So yes, the scoring is simple, but with its sneaky, or perhaps unintentional, suicide score boosting, there's definitely more here than meets the eye, even in a 1cc run. So how about Gunhed's presentation? Well, what's here is what we definitely define as a total mixed bag. Visually, Gunhed is pretty slick. There's a lot here that looks pretty fantastic when it comes to the backgrounds, enemies, and player sprites. The UI is also clean and well designed. Detailed pixel art makes most of the visual elements pop, and there's a huge variety to the backgrounds, even though some of them seem to be vertical homages to Gradius and Lifeforce, such as Stage 5's Moai heads, Stage 4's biological theme, and the Bubble Gauntlet in Stage 8. Stage 1, 7, and 9 are all pretty similar to each other though, which kind of makes us wonder why the game couldn't have been 6 stages rather than 9. If they were going to go on forever anyway, why not? On the sound front though, outside of the title theme, there is very little we like in Gunhed's OST. There's just something to the music that's really annoying, especially in Stage 3. Thankfully, the sound effects on the whole are serviceable, save for the VO for weapon and sub-weapon pickups. They have to be the least enthusiastic announcements we've heard in a shooter to date. There's one final thing. We have to admit, Gunhed looks like a pretty sweet movie, but we don't really see how this game actually ties in outside of its name, especially with blazing lasers being identical from start to finish beyond the title screen and lack of specific hidden options. What's up with that? But otherwise, how does Gunhed stack up? Let's take a look. The control in Gunhed is solid. There's no real need for anything past or before Speed 2 though. By default, Gunhed is pretty easy. A 1cc should be possible with little to no practice, especially with the number of bombs and extends the player can amass. The length of Gunhed goes way beyond what should be considered good. There were several times when we found ourselves sighing dejectedly as stages went on and on and on and on and on. Visually, Gunhed is very good. The backgrounds can be pretty great, but some feel too similar to others. The weakest part of Gunhed by far is its sound. Its OST is irritating in ways I never imagined possible from a game by Compile, and while its actual sound effects are good, the VO for pickups sounds tired and completely deflated. Like many of Compile's games, Gunhed has some great mechanics, especially when it comes down to its weapon and special life systems. On the other hand, they're also just like every other Compile game we've played, and with only a very basic scoring system beyond the actual gameplay, Gunhed isn't much to write home about, especially as a caravan shooter. Gunhed can be a costly game for what players will find here. It's not uncommon to see complete copies top $100. Blazing Lasers is typically less expensive though. Loose copies might be the best way to play this on the cheap. Compile is one of those companies that its fans swear can do no wrong, but Gunhed isn't exactly the best we've seen so far. It's definitely playable, but like an annoying friend that insists on making everyone in the car listen to an awful mixtape on a long road trip that missed an exit, some players will definitely start looking at the clock and wondering when Gunhed will just get on with it. Gunhed gets a 3.5 out of 5. At auction, you can find copies of Gunhed and Blazing Lasers in varying states of completeness, starting at $30 and up as of this episode. Well, that wasn't quite what we had hoped, but we know that the Hudson Caravan games definitely get better. The saga continues with Superstar Soldier in 1990 coming soon. Maybe. You know how it goes. But up next, we have a special comparison episode of Bullet Heaven for Ikaruga coming in episode 212.